We're venturing into an area today that we normally don't get into here on the channel, and that is the world of professional wrestling. I don't talk about the WWE because I don't watch it, and there are plenty of other channels here on YouTube that cover it extensively, know a hell of a lot more about the WWE than I do. I did grow up watching wrestling, back when it was actually entertaining. I don't know how anyone over the age of 13 or 15 years old can watch the WWE today and find it even remotely interesting, but to each his own. I've been going back and forth all week on whether or not I wanted to talk about this story involving Ric Flair. Even though we don't talk wrestling, what's happening to Ric Flair right now does fall into the purview of one of the topics that we discuss often here on the channel: cancel culture. There is a movement right now trying to cancel Ric Flair for something that happened 20 years ago. Here we are again, with the damn media, with social media, the assist from losers on social media, making a big deal about something that happened before some of these assholes were even born. Some of these pimply-faced geeks on social media, they were still a seed in their dad's nutsack when the incident involving Ric Flair and Heidi Doyle happened. Headline over at Deadspin, one of the biggest promoters of propaganda on the internet: "It's time for WWE, AEW, and everyone else to move on from Ric Flair." Why? Number one, Ric Flair's 72 years old. I don't think this dude is going to get into a wrestling ring anytime soon. And number two, we're talking about something that happened 20 years ago. This incident took place in 2002. And look, I'm not downplaying what happened. I guess I should explain what's going on. Should have done that from the start for you guys that don't know. Vice has a series called Dark Side of the Ring. They also have Dark Side of the 90s. Both of them are great series. Even though I don't watch the WWE anymore, I do find Dark Side of the Ring to be compelling. It covers wrestlers and stories from the era of wrestling that I grew up watching. Last week, the topic was the plane ride from hell, a topic that has been discussed numerous times over the last 20 years. Now, for those of you that don't know, back in 2002, after a tour over in Europe, Vince McMahon and the WWE chartered a plane for their talent back to the United States. It was a private plane. They had an open bar, limitless booze. A plane full of professional wrestlers, most of them on the gas, on steroids, supplied with limitless free booze. Who knows how many pharmaceuticals were on board that plane? I wonder what the hell can go wrong in that scenario. Well, everything went wrong. The plane ended up being delayed on the tarmac for something like 5, 6, 7 hours. Before they even took off, they had to restock the alcohol 3 times. So you had 40, 50 intoxicated professional wrestlers locked inside of an airplane with a 7-hour flight ahead of them, and they had already been grounded for 7 hours. A lot happened on that flight, but the biggest story coming out of the Vice documentary is the behavior of Ric Flair. The antics of Ric Flair, they have been documented and covered relentlessly over the years. ESPN did a 30 for 30 on him a few years ago. They talked about all of his transgressions. He's written books. Books have been written about Ric Flair. Everyone knows how Ric Flair was living in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. It is not a secret. Heidi Doyle was a flight attendant on the flight back home from Europe. On the flight, she alleges that Ric Flair cornered her in a galley and forced her to touch his junk. She also alleges that he was walking around on the plane with only his robe, nothing on underneath, and swirling his dick around like a helicopter. I believe her. There is not a doubt in my mind that she's telling the truth. I watched her tell the story on this documentary on Vice. She's credible. The main reason I believe her is because this was the pattern of behavior for Ric Flair back then. Not only Ric Flair, but wrestlers in general. It was a different time, it was a different era. Behavior that was deemed acceptable, well, maybe not acceptable, maybe I should say behavior that was viewed as not a big deal in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s. It was looked at as boys being boys. That same behavior is not seen as acceptable in 2021. Now, I'm not defending Ric Flair and his actions with what I'm about to tell you guys. People have a tendency to look back at things that happened decades ago, and they view it through the viewpoint of social norms in 2021. Then they try to cancel people for situations that happened decades ago. I don't think anyone is trying to defend the behavior of Ric Flair, what happened on that plane. But there is something that people are overlooking here. Little piece of information that doesn't fit the narrative of cancel culture. It's the intent, the context. The intent of Ric Flair was not to sexually assault Heidi Doyle. Ric Flair walking around in a robe, making his junk resemble a helicopter, as weird as it sounds, it was somewhat of a tradition in professional wrestling back then. He had been doing that since the 80s. Hell, there are stories of him doing the same thing back when he was in college. It was a joke. It was something that he did to entertain the other wrestlers. It was harmless to him. He had been doing it for so long without anyone getting offended by it that at the time, Ric Flair didn't think it was unacceptable. He wasn't trying to hurt anyone. He was having a good time. He was trying to entertain people on a long flight home. Heidi Doyle even admits that Ric Flair's intent was not malicious. She said on the documentary she didn't think he was trying to rape her. She knew he wasn't trying to rape her, as a matter of fact. He was not trying to harm her. He made her uncomfortable. He crossed the line. Here's the thing. If what happened was criminal, how come Heidi Doyle didn't go to the police? What happened as soon as she got off the plane? The flight attendants went straight to the lawyers instead of the cops. They got paid, settled out of court in 2004. And you know what? Good for them. They should have gotten paid for this. I bring this up because this was settled in 2004. It has been over for 17 years. And all of a sudden, we want to cancel Ric Flair now? Where was the outrage in 2002? Where was the outrage in 2004? The only reason that there is outrage now is because this story fits the narrative. It fits into the Me Too agenda. How come there's never any outrage when the roles are reversed? When a female is the offender and a male is the victim? Where is Me Too then? I don't ever see any outrage when a 45-year-old teacher sleeps with a 13-year-old boy. Don't ever see outrage for that. Ric Flair's not the only one being canceled here either. They're trying to cancel Tommy Dreamer as well. Apparently, Tommy Dreamer worked for some wrestling company called Impact. I say worked past tense because he's been suspended indefinitely, which is corporate for you're fired. What did Tommy Dreamer do? He came to the defense of Ric Flair in the Vice documentary. He said that Ric Flair was not forcing himself on anyone. He was just being Ric Flair. He was being the life of the party. He did not have malicious intent. Tommy Dreamer said he felt they were trying to portray Ric Flair as a sexual predator, and that just wasn't true. He said if Heidi Doyle was so affected by what happened, she should have went to the police instead of the lawyers. Now, you may not agree with what Tommy Dreamer said, but should he have been fired for it? This is another virtue signal, another overreaction by a company. Impact saw the reaction to this documentary on social media. Oh no, we can't be associated with Tommy Dreamer anymore. Some guy with 3 followers on Twitter is offended by him. We have to fire him. It wasn't just Impact. WWE folded to pressure as well. They removed Ric Flair from their opening montage, because someone might be triggered by the sight of Ric Flair. Doesn't make any sense to me, but what the hell do I know? I know I don't like it. I don't like the cancel culture. I don't like dredging up the past, finding something that happened 20 years ago, and holding someone accountable for it now, especially when they have already been held accountable. The damn lawsuit was settled 17 years ago. What more do you want? This scenario has been talked about relentlessly over the past 20 years. What more do you want? This episode of Dark Side of the Ring, when it premiered last week, it was the lowest rated episode of this series. This show's in its third season. They promoted this plane ride from hell episode. No one cared initially. Few people see the documentary, make a big deal about it on social media. All of a sudden, the episode spreads all over the internet. This thing, like I said, premiered last Thursday. It was barely mentioned last weekend. This story didn't gain any traction until earlier this week. Then, of course, the overreactions begin. Anyway, let me know what you guys think about this situation. Should Ric Flair be canceled for something that happened 20 years ago and has already been settled? He's already been held accountable for it. Let me know what you think. Sound off in the comments below. Make sure to like and subscribe. Click the notification bell to receive all notifications from the channel. Best way to contact me is by email at btlkc84@gmail.com, KC_BTL84 on Twitter. I'll see you guys later.